There are probably a few of us in here who can point to one day in their lives that changed everything, and I wouldn't be here if I hadn't had this particular day. So I grew up in Seattle, Washington. We had a brand new NBA expansion franchise, the Seattle SuperSonics. I fell in love with that team. It was the first professional team representing Seattle. The coolest kid at Queen Anne High School was Earl Woodson. He was a ball boy for the Seattle SuperSonics. Earl, like, you got to take me down and introduce me whoever hires those ball kids, and I scored the job.
The elephant in the room you touched on a little bit was the fallout from this Luka trade.
You got to listen, right? You had people who were hurt, people who were angry. The basketball gods work in incredible ways. We had a 1.8% chance of winning the draft lottery. Magic happens and everything changes.
What were the things that you felt like you immediately recognized as like, these are the cultural elements that we need to keep going here? And what were the things that you thought, this is something new that I could introduce?
So,
welcome to Learning from Leaders, a podcast from Southwestern Medical Foundation where we dive into a world of wisdom, mentorship, and innovation, exploring the insights and life lessons of seasoned community and business leaders. I'm Michael McMahon, President and CEO of Southwestern Medical Foundation. I invite you to subscribe now and join us on this empowering journey of growth and leadership. Now, let's learn from the best and drive meaningful change together.
To the team here at the Southwest Medical Foundation, the rolling out the red carpet doesn't cover it. We've got a great relationship between the Bush Center and that organization. We are so grateful for it, and Mike McMahon over there is about as good a dude as they come. So thank you guys for hosting us and being a part of this. And Lili, this is a pleasure. I work with your dad, and so I'm excited to get to work with you a little bit now.
So much fun.
So a long time ago, I was probably about 35 or 36 when I realized I probably wasn't going to make it as an NBA point guard. I thought I might still be able to make it as a backup at that point, and I realized that it wasn't going to happen. Unfortunately, it happens to a lot of us. Sooner or later, we realize that being on the court probably isn't going to happen. But the dream of sports is sometimes still alive. And Rick, you've made quite a career by being in the front office. Can you tell us about how that started and when you realized it was probably when it happened on the court, but maybe it could happen in the front office?
There are probably a few of us in here who can point to one day in their lives that changed everything, and I wouldn't be here if I hadn't had this particular day. So I grew up in Seattle, Washington. We had a brand new NBA expansion franchise, the Seattle SuperSonics, and I was immediately captivated. My dad and I, that was kind of the currency of our relationship. We would go to games together from the time I could walk, UW football games, whatever it was. So we started going to Sonics games, and I fell in love with that team. It was the first professional team representing Seattle, and I went to Queen Anne High School in Seattle. The coolest kid at Queen Anne High School was Earl Woodson. Why was Earl the coolest kid? Because he was a ball boy for the Seattle SuperSonics. So we hung out in the back of my English lit class every day, and I'd get the scoop on all my favorite players, and I lived for that. And Earl came in one day with a long face. It's like, dude, what's wrong, man? He goes, my family's moving out of town. Earl, like, you got to take me down and introduce me whoever hires those ball kids, and he did, and I scored the job. So I get to be talking to you today.
Are the SuperSonics coming back?
Fingers crossed. The NBA, as you know, has just initiated a process that we hope will result in 2 new teams in Seattle and in Las Vegas. One of the great things that the NBA did 20 years ago when the team left was all the intellectual property stayed in Seattle. So the championship banner, the colors, the name of the team. So hopefully in 2028, we'll have a brand new Seattle SuperSonics team.
And in those early days, you must have had a real work ethic. Are there habits that you picked up then that you still carry with you today?
It sounds crazy, but when you're a 16, 17-year-old kid in a professional sports locker room, a fly on the wall that nobody's paying attention to, there are really lessons that I learned there that it was like a master's course in professional sports, right? I could see the interaction between players and coaches, doctors, media owners, and nobody paid any attention to me. I was the guy who closed the locker room door for the pregame speech and could see how those things worked and sometimes how they didn't work. And it's such a delicate balance that creates the atmosphere where teams can really be successful. And I rely on those lessons every day.
So I think that's a perfect transition into when you first started as CEO of the Mavs, when you're thinking about building that culture and developing that culture in what we all know to be a very established brand. What were the things that you felt like you immediately recognized as like, these are the cultural elements that we need to keep going here? And what were the things that you thought, this is something new that I could introduce?
So, I don't know how closely you follow the history of the Mavericks, but 7 years or so ago, a big, very public expose on the culture of the Mavericks that could not have been less complimentary. It was really viewed as a very toxic culture in the organization. Mark Cuban hired Cynt Marshall, 25-year AT&T veteran, African-American female, to come in and lead. And I had the pleasure of meeting Cynt then, watched what had happened and what she did over those 7 years to restore the credibility of the Mavericks in this market is nothing short of extraordinary. So to be able to step into that role, I talk about big shoes, little feet, with Cynt. Those are big shoes to step into. But from day one, this is going to be about honoring her and the legacy that she created here in community engagement, right? And that is something that I think the Mavericks do as well as any team in sports, and it's something that it's my responsibility to continue the organization, keep doing. I will say, in the time that Mark Cuban owned the team, he loved his basketball team. Didn't spend as much time on the business as you might have thought. So there's really a business opportunity with the Mavericks that hasn't been fully exploited. So it's very possible to have both. You can be a great business and you can continue that legacy of community engagement. So that's my job now.
So when you look back at those first few months, was there anything that you learned that really surprised you?
Well, I got here January 1st a year ago. 30 days later, we might have made a trade. I don't know if any of you heard. I found out at 11 o'clock at night when
Quite the timing.
Patrick Dumont, yeah. I forgot to ask one question in the interview. Okay. So what I learned being a glass half full guy over that next 100 days was the depth of connection and passion that Mavericks fans have for their team. Now, it wasn't always pretty during that time, but it really told me that exists and that can be earned back. And I think that was the biggest lesson. It wasn't a surprise, but it really reinforced what I sensed was out there.
And this town is committed to its sports, and Dallas, I'm a lifelong Dallas guy. We were lucky enough to talk to Dirk a couple weeks ago, and I can think of few people who deserve a statue more than that guy. And he, somehow this German was able to epitomize the city of Dallas. And you said that we want the Mavericks to be really unmistakably Dallas. But what does that mean to you?
Well, looking at it from afar for a long time and now living here, I think Dallas rewards innovation and risk taking, and I think we're embarking on a really interesting chapter in the Mavericks' lives. I use that phrase when we talk about I know we're going to talk about the arena, what we're going to build here, I don't want to build anything. I don't want to build Madison Square Garden. I don't want to build Chase Center in San Francisco, the new Intuit Dome in LA. My hope is that when each of you walks into that arena for the very first time, you say, wow, they get Dallas. And that'll be a combination of things. That'll be the art that you see. That will be the design of the building. That will be the social spaces that are created. I don't know if you know that Dallas is kind of a social town, and I think we can do some things kind of unique that haven't been done before. But that's the goal. We want people to say this is a great expression of Dallas.
And before we go too deep into the arena, which I've got questions about the arena for sure. The Mavericks are such a part of this community, but in your mind, what does the sports team being a part of a community look like? And what's the Mavericks plan to kind of stay involved there?
It's just an incredible privilege to have the platform that we have, right? It's the way our players in particular touch a young audience is quite extraordinary compared to the other sports. And it's such an outsized platform compared to really the size of the economic business that we're in, right? And that comes with a responsibility and an opportunity. And that's what every sports team should look at and see how they're using this incredible stage that we have with these very influential people in our community to do good things for the people that are the only reason we get to go to work in the morning. So I think it's the NBA. I'm very proud of the NBA and its legacy of that. And I think that the Mavericks are a great example of it.
Mm-hmm. So now digging into the arena.
Okay.
So you have led various venue changes and development projects with the Golden State Warriors and the Phoenix Suns. What do you think is going to kind of make, as the Mavs are in these discussions now, I'm curious what you think it will take to like really get this venue and arena right. And also what you think is really at stake, both from the team perspective, but also the city perspective and the fan perspective.
Well, our lease expires at American Airlines in 2031. We want to be in a new building. It's not just going to be an arena, number one. It's going to be a 50-acre entertainment district that's anchored by an arena, but it's also going to have, our headquarters, our practice facility, hotels, plural, retail, residential. It's going to be a change maker for some part of the city. And we've said out loud that we want to be the team that wears Dallas on their jerseys that plays in Dallas. So that's what we're really focused on right now. What do we need? First of all, we need a place, okay? It would be a really good starting point. And we're hoping by this July to be able to tell everybody associated and interested in the Mavericks where we're going to be. The city of Dallas has been super helpful in helping us identify potential sites. Not that many 50-acre sites in Dallas that would be the right location for something like this. No secret, we're looking hard at downtown, but it's not the only place we could potentially be. These things generate amazing development around them too. If we do, and we will do exactly what I said we're going to do, it really is a catalyst for development way beyond just the project itself. So that's, I think, one of the great benefits. I'm one of those people who, I guess I grew up in a way where sports teams really added to my quality of life. I mean, going all the way back to those games with my dad in Seattle in 1967. I was drawn to the game, but something different was happening there. Those 14,000 people who didn't know each other had only one thing in common, which was their interest in that team. It changed our community. It was a point of pride. All of a sudden, we're listed in the standings in the newspaper with Los Angeles and New York and Chicago. It was really a point of pride, and it made our city better. And I think that's what these things do, and that's what we have the opportunity to do here in Dallas.
It's, the Bush Center got lucky. We went to SMU and they're like, hey, sure, have 20 acres. We asked for 50. I guess they didn't have it or something, but you maybe should maybe reach out to SMU, see if they've got some more acres laying around.
Thank you.
My tip. But in all seriousness, this is going to be a hard decision. And that's where President Bush talks about decision making often. And as a leader, how do you approach a decision that is this complicated, has this many factors, is going to affect so many people, both families going to games as well as employment in the city? How do you weigh all these things and come up with one recommendation?
Yeah, well, I think you listen to everybody. I've been privileged to meet a lot of community leaders here, a lot of political leaders, a lot of business leaders, and got a lot of wisdom from their experience here in Dallas and what their view of the world is here and what we should be doing. I also think, just for me, kind of the way I'm wired is that I like to reach out to people who I think could add value to decision making. The NBA has a really unique culture that way, very different from the other leagues in that every day I'm talking to other executives at teams, CEOs or presidents. There's really nothing new in terms of a problem or an issue in our industry. And it doesn't mean that, when I reach out to somebody and ask, like, I know you faced this, what did you do about it? It doesn't mean that you're going to do that, but it really informs your decision on how to take others' experience in dealing with similar things and apply them to what you're doing, and you weigh all that, and somebody's got to make the decision at the end, and that's my responsibility on a lot of things. And I just think it's a process that if you're disciplined about it, you more times than not will get to the right answer.
Have there been other arena projects that you've seen recently that really have inspired you and made you really feel like, wow, that's something that really we should look at for Dallas?
So that's an unfair question, because 7 years of my life was spent building Chase Center in San Francisco. I think I'm probably here because Patrick Dumont, the owner of the Mavericks, that's his favorite building. I was there last night for their game, flew back to Dallas this morning. We're not going to build Chase Center, like I said, but I do think from a level of finish, from a level of fan experience, from the other things that are part of that project, the restaurants, the open plazas, the gathering places, there's a lot of lessons to be learned from I'm a stadium and arena geek. If there's nothing I would rather do than just walk around a stadium or walk around an arena, because it doesn't matter how old it is, it doesn't matter what the sport is, you really do learn something, that you hadn't seen before. And I get inspired by that. I mean, think about, I don't know what the equivalent will be in your life or yours. Think about this opportunity to take everything you've learned about the business you're in, for me, NBA basketball, and give it a one-of-a-kind physical form that's going to create memories for families in North Dallas for generations to come. What a privilege and what an opportunity. So we're going to get it right. We're going to take the best of what's been out there, not copying anybody in particular, and hopefully add some innovations that haven't been done before, and kind of take the technology a step further than any other team has taken it.
And do you look also at just other stadiums outside of basketball arenas? Do you look at baseball stadiums? Do you look at football arenas?
Absolutely. I mean, the Battery, the Atlanta Braves development in Atlanta is a really great example of the kind of thing we would do. Now, they did that in the suburbs, which is great. We want to do that in the city. And I think basketball is a city game, and I think we like, playing in the city. So yeah, you can learn from, and all over the world. You never go into a stadium and arena where, like I said, you don't learn something new.
Well, and the elephant in the room you touched on a little bit was the fallout from this Luka trade. And as a leader, what was your approach in trying to deal with what's a hard situation between the fans and the organization?
You got to listen, right? You had people who were hurt, people who were angry. You really have to listen. You have to not be defensive. You really have to accept how people are feeling and give them a platform to be able to express that. And then you got to figure out how to win back their trust and their loyalty. And the basketball gods work in incredible ways. Exactly 100 days, not 99, not 101 days after that trade. I was the only one from the organization who was sitting at our little table at the NBA draft lottery because nobody else wanted to go. We had a 1.8% chance of winning the draft lottery. Magic happens, and we have the opportunity to draft Cooper Flagg. And everything changes, right? It's now the centerpiece of what the Mavericks are going to be moving forward, a generational talent. The kid is barely 19 years old, and he's doing things that now he's breaking records that LeBron James or Kobe Bryant did at his age. He's done things that no teenager has ever done before, and he's an absolutely great kid from a great family. So we are so blessed in Dallas and at the Mavericks to be able to get this kid at this stage of his career. I've never seen anything like it. 48th NBA season, you actually see incremental improvement every single game as he figures out something new. And, last week having a back-to-back 50 and 45-point games, no teenagers ever done that in the history of the game. And he's ours, and he'll be the centerpiece of what we're going to do going forward.
I look around the room and I'm like, what was everybody here doing when they were 19? And I know I was not scoring 50 in the NBA.
He's a little different.
Yeah.
Well, you all have clearly, no doubt, created so many memories for Dallas families here and have been such an iconic brand for our city. And you've also been a great partner to so many organizations around our city. Just last year, I think you all expanded your partnership with UT Southwestern as the official medical provider for the Mavs. Could you talk about that partnership and how you think it might serve the Mavs, but also the city going forward?
Yeah, it's been one of the great experiences I've had since I've been here to meet administrators, doctors who are part of UT Southwestern. It is a gem in Dallas. Like there's really nothing like it, maybe nothing like it in the world. And, they have taken such an active role in engaging the community and being part of the community. So for us to be able to do that, well, there is a benefit. Like our players have the absolute best medical care in the world. Okay, that's a pretty good thing when you're a professional athlete. But we're having conversations about where from here. No breaking news to report, but I do think, we're talking about how UT Southwestern could be integrated into this new project that we're doing. Maybe a new medical facility, maybe a consumer-facing piece of that, in addition to taking care of our athletes. So I'm just overwhelmed with the level of engagement and competence and expertise that exists in that organization. We're super proud to be associated.
How do you think about when you are either forming a new partnership or expanding one like with UT Southwestern? How do you think about making sure that the partnership is something more than kind of sponsorship dollars or a branding opportunity? Because to your point, these are two incredibly special, I would say both of you all are gems of Dallas. How do you think about really making sure that that the partnership goes beyond kind of the sponsorship dollars?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's actually the part of the business I grew up in. My first job at the NBA, I was 1982 was this can sound crazy, 35th employee, number one, 1,100 when I left, 17 years later all over the world. But I was the very first person hired to go out and try to convince marketing companies to invest dollars in the NBA. Sounds like the easiest job in the world. I can't tell you what the NBA was like in 1982. It was a train wreck, okay? More talk about teams going out of business than expansion, first league tainted with widespread accusations of drug use amongst its players, very poorly run as a business. I couldn't get an appointment. I moved from Seattle to New York City and go home in my little Manhattan apartment and wonder, like, what have I gotten myself into? This isn't what it was like in Seattle when we won a championship. But I think it's really changed. Companies used to have sports marketing budgets, okay, where they knew they were going to spend this much money in sports as part of their marketing. That doesn't exist anymore. Bad news and good news. The good news is if you create programs that can actually touch their consumer in a way that helps their business, you really have unlimited resources, unlimited ability to channel their marketing dollars into your organization. So it's so different than it was when I started, where they worried about what seats the CEO would have and what sign was going to be in the stadium. That doesn't get you to first base anymore. You really have to be able to measure and deliver actual results that justify these investments. And if you're honest partners and figuring that out along the way, contract is great, but it's a starting point, not an ending point. And we're in the business of renewing those, not just selling those. So how you perform, what kind of partners you become, how you solve companies' problems, and using, again, the visibility we have as a sport, that's what determines how successful you are. So it's changed a lot, but I love where it is today.
And when you're looking at kind of back to the UT Southwestern piece, just generally as you're looking at kind of health and wellness related issues that the city of Dallas might face or that your athletes might face, like what do you think are some interesting partnership concepts that you might have top of mind?
We talked to UT Southwestern about this too. I really think one of the great strides that professional sports have made is really on dealing with mental health of athletes, right? It's huge. Like, especially in men's sports, this has historically been this macho, nothing phases me, nothing bothers me kind of thing. And actually, it turns out they're all human beings, right? So they're dealing with the same struggles that any other human being does. Just, you know, they have a much brighter light shining on their career. So I really think we've made some great strides. I think we have a lot more that we can do. And I think, you know, for athletes to make mental health as big a part of, you know, how we take care of our players as much as their physical health, I think continues to be a more important thing and a big opportunity that can help everybody.
Yeah, we thank you for saying that, because that is such a change that we've seen in sports, and that's where sports has been able to really be, in some ways, a reflection of society. That as society, we're getting better about mental health, and that's a big element that the Bush Center is interested in right now is sports and unity. And would love to hear you talk more about this idea of how sports can be leaders in this way in our communities.
Well, again, we have this amazing platform. Our athletes touch, especially young people, in ways that the other sports just don't do. I'm not exactly sure why. Somehow our players are more culturally relevant. Maybe it's because we approach this a little more as the entertainment business than the other sports did historically. But, you know, each of our players has got their own foundation, their own causes, but also when we come together as a league and as a players association, you know, it's just encouraging people to be able to talk about these subjects. And, you know, Charles Barkley famously said, we're not role models at one point, but they are role models, and they are really examples that especially young people, again, look up to and find inspiration from and get guidance from. So I think we have a great opportunity to continue that dialogue.
And so this is a video podcast. We're all here in person. Hope everybody's noticed the ring on your finger. You have had a full career. We listed off some of the things here as this kicked off, from All-Star Weekend to the Golden State Warriors to the Phoenix Suns. We were talking stories from the Phoenix Suns days before we got started here. You've had a full NBA life. You had reached the promised land. You said, I am calling it a day, and yet the Mavericks call, and here you are traveling, working the long hours. What pulled you out of retirement?
Yeah. Some days I ask myself that. Okay. No, I happily retired from the Warriors 2021. You know, had 3.5 years of traveling the world. I did have NBA projects that I was involved with, but Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, called one day and said, you know, I really like this Patrick Dumont, who bought the Dallas Mavericks. And as you know, Cynt Marshall's retiring. Would you just have a conversation with them about who they might be looking at, who might be candidates for the job? So I fell for the lead. And I remember my first Zoom call with Patrick. I think he was at the practice facility, and you know, you get to bump into a few billionaires when you're dealing with owners in this league. He was unlike anything I could have possibly expected. I didn't know anything about him. Very soft-spoken, asked a lot of questions, was really interesting to talk to. And he's like, okay, let's do this again. It's like, okay, well, let's do it again. And after that, I was learning more about him and about his history. And then he said, well, why don't you come up to Las Vegas? Well, you meet the family. Should have known.
You're getting deeper in. You realize it.
And then kind of at the end of a dinner up there, he said, you know, we've been thinking like maybe if you wanted to do this. And listen, I've watched this franchise since its inception. I was coming to games at Reunion Arena. The original Dallas Mavericks organization changed the business of professional basketball for sure, maybe professional sports. The level of professionalism that Norm Sanju and Donald Carter created in that organization. When I was at the league office at the time, we just kept sending teams to Dallas. Like, you got to try to do it like this. And then, you know, watching the team historically, the history of fan support, the unbelievable growth that this area is experiencing now, business friendly, you know, a place that has every success ingredient to stand toe-to-toe with any franchise in sports. So if I was going to do this anywhere else, I can't imagine another place I could have done it. And Dallas has been everything that I knew it was and expected it to be up to this point, for sure.
And in 20 years from now, when you retire again, 25, fine, 25. What are you hoping that your legacy reads in not just sports, but your life?
I don't like the word as it applies to yourself. Like that's for somebody else to judge. There's some things that I hope I can do here. One is like embrace the history of this franchise. I think we lost our way a little bit in not honoring the legacy that we have inherited and are stewards of that franchise now. And I think we've worked really hard in the last year to try to bring some of the historic characters back into the organization, establish relationships there. That's part of what I know is our responsibility. I want to build the best place to watch NBA basketball and other events that's ever been done before. That would be pretty cool if we get that right. But it's imagine being able to get up every morning and be as excited as I am to come into work every day and get to do something that I love doing. I've worked every day of my life to try to make the sport of NBA basketball better and more appealing and more interesting to people. And journey's not over yet. We'll see.
I know it's old school Mavericks basketball, but it warmed my heart to see Mark Aguirre come out there and tear up and get his moment that he really deserved.
That was pretty cool. Yeah, good moment this year.
So we've talked a lot over the last few minutes about how sports just clearly has this unique ability to unify communities, bring people together. And it also seems so clear that you embody that too as a leader of the Mavs, and in your efforts to really grow the sport. We heard earlier that you have been involved in really growing the WNBA, and we'd love to hear about what that's been like. Of course, I think we're all aware that women's basketball is just having a huge time and huge growth right now. Would love to hear about your role in that.
Yeah, and that's beyond women's basketball, it's women's sports in general. It's so amazing. Do you know that we're coming up on the 30th anniversary of the WNBA? I mean, in a lot of people's lives, they've discovered it the last 2 or 3 years. But, for the 25 years before that, there were so many people who worked so hard to try to create this amazing platform for women's sports. It goes back, the origination of it really goes back. I'd been at the league office for quite a while. We're starting to feel pretty good about where we are and started to talk about, is there anything else that we could use this organization that we've created, anything else we could be doing? And a lot of ideas out there. Someday when I write a book, we'll talk about the failed 6 months of working with NBC and conference rooms to try to figure out how to launch a new football league. That a really good idea not to do that. We didn't do that.
Excited for that book.
We didn't really have a minor league in basketball. That seemed like it could be a logical thing for us to try to create as a talent pipeline into the NBA. But we kept coming back to the fact, what's different about basketball? And what was different about basketball is we had this amazing infrastructure of women's college basketball that none of the other leagues had. And at the time, our American women, we felt, were the best players, but they were no longer winning the top international competitions, the Olympics or the World Championships, because we would throw 15 players together 2 weeks before the Olympics. And they were playing these teams that played together every day of the year for forever, and we weren't winning. So that's really what, if we could, and I credit the NBA for this, David Stern, like, we'll pay for putting the best 15 American women together, let them play for a year before the 96 Atlanta Olympics, and let's see what happens. And that could be the basis of launching a league. And that team, Tara Vanderveer, the legendary coach from Stanford, took a year away from Stanford. That team traveled all over the world playing games, went 56-0 going into the Atlanta Olympics. NBC was broadcasting the Olympics. They were potentially going to be our broadcast partner. That was the American women owned the 96 Olympics and everything, and nothing was more visible than the women's national team winning the basketball gold medal. And really, that was the genesis of launching the league. And to see where it is right now, to finally see the economics developing for the players, to see the ratings, the ascendancy of all women's sports. It's, there's nothing more gratifying in my career to know that, we're a part of starting that.
And I'm curious, we've seen, I guess, especially with the rise of women's sports, we've seen so many new leagues recently. I'm curious, like with Unrivaled and the WNBA having different models, like what are your thoughts on that and how they've operated?
So far, so good. I do think this collective bargaining agreement that just was concluded with the WNBA a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, is the game changer. That's the moment in time where everything changed. You know, we'll have players earning well over $1 million, not a couple $100,000 that were our top salaries before. Everything about it, I think, is fair and headed in the right direction. Franchise valuations, we just announced 3 more expansion teams, I think at $250 million a piece. I just think the trajectory now, this isn't a moment. We had a few moments in the past. This is really a movement that we're not going to go back on. So, you know, again, it's just a wonderful time.
Mm-hmm. And to your point earlier, I mean, these players on both the men's and women's teams are not just players, they really do serve as role models for so many out there. How do you think about just making sure that the players, but also leaders of the leagues and of the teams are really continuing to foster these teams' ability to be a true force for good in their communities?
Yeah, and I'm really proud of our league and WNBA in terms of how the players are prepared to, be out there and be visible, take not always popular political stands, but not be afraid and be supported by the leagues and the organizations for having the right to do that. These are not just athletes, these are smart young people who have opinions about the world around them, and I think we've embraced that. Not always best for our business, not always best for how everybody feels about that. It's always crazy to me when people talk about how we should keep politics and sports separate. Sports is always the intersection of where these controversial issues get discussed. Okay, it's just that's just what sports is, and to embrace that, not shy away from that. Again, to use these incredible platforms our players have to be able to do positive things in their community is something that players, I think, have an obligation to, but fortunately, most of them embrace in a big way.
And so as we get close to wrapping here, this is a room of young professionals, and I don't think I'm a young professional anymore. I'm just an old professional. But when I was a young professional, and still to this day, though, I had a good mentor. He's actually sitting in this room. Sully Sullivan has taught me so much.
He's taught me a lot too.
Well, and I'd love to hear who in your career has really taught you some pivotal lessons along the way.
You know, I just had the blessing. So this young lawyer called me one day and said, "Hey, I'm starting a business organization at the NBA. Would you be interested?" And I got to fly back to New York City and spend a night in the Waldorf Astoria Hotel and walk over to the NBA office, and we really connected. And I checked all the boxes that he was looking for. I was young. I was passionate about the NBA. Maybe most importantly, I was really cheap at the time. And I became one of the young execs at the NBA, that just kind of at the beginning of what you see the NBA today. He, 2 years later, got elected commissioner to the NBA. David Stern served in that role for 30 years. I worked for him for 17 years and lived to tell about it, which, if you know his reputation, that's quite an accomplishment. But probably learned more of those lessons from him. I think if I could pick one, it's just the value of intellectual curiosity. He had this unique ability to kind of come into the office every day and be prepared to challenge anything that he'd learned before. Okay, you would go into his office for a meeting, and at the end of it, it was pre-internet. There's a stack of clippings on his desk, and he'd be ruffling through and be one with my name, and he'd hand it to me, and I'd go to my office and I'd be reading this I have no idea why he gave this to me. And then there'd be one sentence in there. It's oh, okay, I get it. But just the ability to come in and be prepared to challenge everything that you think you've learned, looking outside your world to other examples of how people do it. Maybe give yourself the intellectual freedom to say, maybe they understand that's not how we do it. Maybe they understand something I don't, and work your way back into why you're doing things the way you are. The only way you could make sure the meeting went south fast is if he asked you the question why are we doing that? And if your answer was, because we did it that way last year, not good. Okay, not good. You better have a better explanation than that. So I just think the value of waking up every day, believing you're going to learn something new and not being able to, be afraid to challenge some of the things that you think you know, keeps you like very in the moment and always gives you the opportunity to move forward.
So with that, before we open to a brief Q&A, we do have some quick rapid fire questions for you. So first thing that comes to mind.
Let's go. I'm ready.
Okay, the first one is, what was the first concert you ever went to?
This will date me. It was in that same building where I was a ball kid, the Seattle Center Coliseum. It was the original Beach Boys.
All right.
Original
lineup?
Opening, Brian Wilson. The opening act was Jan and Dean. But I also, like that arena we're going to build here, the majority of the events will not be basketball games. But these are the kind of memories that these buildings create. And I bet 99 out of 100 of you can answer that question, where you were, who you saw on your first concert.
When you need to local go-to meal, you're not cooking at home, where are you going here in Dallas?
Terry Black's barbecue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What is one non-negotiable in your daily routine?
Absolutely, positively, the half hour I get to walk my 2 rescued terriers every morning by myself. That's the best half hour of the day.
It sounds glorious.
It really does.
Yep.
So if sports wouldn't have worked out, if you wouldn't have gotten that gig when Earl left to be the ball boy in Seattle, what career do you think you would have pursued?
Journalism. Like I went to college during Watergate. I have to explain to young people like this, there was a time that journalists were actually truth tellers and heroes. And I was very inspired by that storytelling. I wanted to tell great stories through my journalism.
What is one piece of advice that you repeat so often, it's basically become a personal slogan?
Actually, have it hanging on my wall in the office. Usually we're remodeling our offices right now, but kind of keep calm and carry on. That World War II British phrase that I think kind of embodies how I try to come to work every day.
Other than Learning from Leaders or The Strategist, what is a podcast, book, or show that you've recommended? Absolutely, that you've recommended more than once.
I think if you're I grew up in Seattle. Nike was this little startup company outside of Portland, Oregon, and I was obsessed by Nike my whole career. So, book about Phil Knight called Shoe Dog. If you're really interested in the sports business, it's a must read.
Okay, last question is, what is one word you hope people use 5 years from now to describe the relationship between the Mavs and Dallas?
How about love?
I can't think of someone that might be busier than this man right here, and he just took an hour out of his day to really help us out here. So round of applause for Rick Welts, please. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
I hope everybody's enjoyed this. I know there's some Bush Center members here and some Southwest Medical Foundation Carey Council members here. I would love for everybody to be members of both. If you're a Carey Council Foundation member, we'd love to have you here on the Bush Center side, and I'm sure vice versa, right, Lili?
Absolutely. And just echoing Andrew's thanks, Rick, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your insights. And Andrew, thank you for being a co-moderator. This was a lot of fun. And thank you all so much. Another round of applause for Rick Welts.
Thank you. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks for listening to Learning from Leaders. If you enjoyed this episode, we invite you to subscribe now for monthly episode drops so that you can continue to learn from experienced business and community leaders to help you drive meaningful change in your community.